It's not always money well spent. Welcome back, guys and gals. As always, my name is Matt. If you guys are new here, welcome to the channel. Today, we're going to do things a little bit differently. I tend to talk a lot about backpacking gear that I love, and I tend to show off gear that I'm really into and kind of my system and what I'm using. We're going to do things a little bit differently today, and I'm going to talk about some backpacking gear that over the years I've bought and have really come to regret making those purchases. Gear I regret buying, or backpacking gear that didn't work out for me. That's what we're going to talk about today. So we're just going to jump into it. We're going to talk about gear that I bought over the years that really did not work out for me. So let's get into it. You guys probably hear me rant and rave and talk and praise hammocks all the time. So it may surprise you guys that the very first thing we're going to talk about in the gear that I regret buying is actually a hammock. It's this guy right here. If you guys have ever looked up hammocks at all on Amazon or seen the Eno hammocks, that's basically what this is. This is just a $25 parachute style hammock that I picked up off Amazon. It's just this like really heavy, cheap parachute nylon. They almost all come in these 3 sections with this really heavily sewn seam here. And like this seam is actually one of the big reasons that I can't stand this hammock. I get really, really bad calf rage, even just lounging in this thing in my yard, just from the seam. I get it on my shoulder as well on the opposite side. So yeah, I'm really not a fan of these hammocks at all. This is actually what I had picked up as sort of my like intro to hammocks, and I've had this thing for quite a while. When I first got into hammock camping, I had a couple of buddies that were into it, and I looked at the amount of money that they were dropping on their hammocking systems. Like my friend Devin went with a Dutchware Chameleon, and my friend Eric went with a Warbonnet Blackbird XLC. Both of them had the custom underquilts and top quilts and everything for their hammock setups, and you know the tarps with the doors and all that stuff. So they ran pretty pricey setups, and for me looking into hammock camping, I was like, that's a lot of money to invest into it before knowing if I'm actually going to like sleeping in a hammock. So I went looking around for cheaper alternatives. This guy here is what I found. If this was my only experience with hammock camping, I would not be a hammock camper at all. I wouldn't even be close. Going on a couple trips with my buddies Devin and Eric, they talked me into trying out their hammocks, and crawling inside an actual dedicated 11-foot sleeping hammock, which is like the hammocks I have now, like my little Shop of Hammocks Warrior and my new Dream Hammock Raven. Entirely different experience compared to laying in a little like 8.5 to 9 foot hammock like these parachute hammocks are. Definitely not even worth the 20 bucks that I spent to get it. The next gear regret we're going to talk about is one that I mentioned briefly on a live stream I did recently with my buddies Jesse and Justin over on Justin's channel, Justin Outdoors. I'll put a link to that up here if you guys haven't checked that out yet. We did a live stream over on Justin's channel where we talked about gear that we hate, and I talked about this guy here specifically. This is the Goal Zero Torch 250. At one point in time, I thought that this was gonna revolutionize my backpacking experience. What this is a giant battery bank. So you've got a USB here, so you can plug your USB cord into to charge devices and whatnot. It's also got a whole bunch of different light functions. It's got a little red light there, and then you got this big spotlight here. And then my thought where this would revolutionize my backpacking setup is it's got this little solar panel here on the front. I went and spent about $120 and I bought this thing. I've taken it on 2 backpacking trips. One of the trips I brought it to actually see if I could use this as a viable lighting source for my YouTube videos, but the weight and bulk of it, and just the fact that like there's no way to lock it out. And what I find happens to me a lot is because the buttons are really sensitive, it doesn't take much to turn the button on and run the light, and it just drains the battery. I didn't think that was going to be a problem when I first got it because I thought, oh, it's got a solar panel on it. Awesome. If you guys saw the live stream I did with Justin and Jesse, you guys will know that I am not a believer in solar in the backcountry. It could just be the area that I hike, but in my experience, solar has been an absolute epic failure. I tend to deal with a lot of tree cover in the Rockies here, so you spend about half your day hiking in the trees anyways. And a lot of times you get an entire summer where you get rained on every trip you go, so I don't find solar a viable, reliable source for power in the backcountry. I've just opted to carry battery banks with enough milliamp power to power me to charge up all my devices to keep me going through a trip. We're going to talk about knives. This guy right here, this is the Spyderco Finch 2. This is the knife that I use currently. No joke, this is the knife I carry with me on my backpacking trips. It's absolutely tiny, razor sharp. This thing weighs an ounce. In all my years backpacking, this knife here would have sufficed for any time that I've ever needed to pull a blade out of my pack. The only things I've ever had to cut on a backpacking trip ever has been shaving the end of a stick off to put a hot dog on, or cutting a piece of cordage. That is pretty much it. I've never really used a knife for anything else in all my years of backpacking. So that's what I carry now, is a little Spyderco Finch 2. But that was not always the case. This is an SOG Seal Pup. This is like a Navy SEAL tactical knife. It's like a Matty-sized Rambo knife. This is what I was carrying with me for a backpacking knife. I legit used to carry a knife like this strapped to the shoulder strap of my pack. So I just had this like little freaking tactical Navy SEAL knife strapped to me all the time. I'm not really sure what I was thinking. And this is half a pound right there. This is what I used to carry for a knife. So next piece of gear we're going to talk about is this guy right here. This is the Teton Sports Poncho Tarp. Now this isn't a direct shot at the Teton Sports Poncho Tarp directly, but just I guess Poncho Tarps in general for me. When I first started to think about going into lightweight backpacking, this was my plan, was to go with a Poncho Tarp as my rain gear and also as my shelter system. So I was going to pitch this as a tarp shelter and just hang a little bug net thing inside of it. Just an absolute epic failure. I discovered with this real quick how much I despise ponchos out in backpacking. So it made it on one trip with me, and that was it. The Poncho Tarp idea was a huge failure for me. If you guys are tired of seeing me talk about gear that I absolutely despise and I'm never going to use again, and you guys would rather see me talk about gear that I really like and really enjoy and I'm really looking forward to using in 2020, what I'm going to do for you guys is put a link right up here to my new gear for 2020 that I'm absolutely stoked to use. So when you guys are done watching this one, head on over to that one. So as always, guys, I am Matty. Thank you all so dang much for watching, and I will see you guys on the next one.